Australia built some of the toughest, most respected cars in the world, but it also gave us machines so strange, so confusing, they looked like they shouldn't exist at all. And I'm not talking about cars that are just a bit different. I mean cars that looked unfinished, overdesigned, or like the designers and engineers completely stopped talking halfway through. Welcome to the weirdest looking Australian cars ever made, starting with the mildly bizarre and ending with something so unbelievably strange it still doesn't feel real even today. In 1989, HDT Special Vehicles, operating under new ownership after an acrimonious split with Peter Brock, decided to completely reinvent the already controversial VN Commodore. The Arrow arrived wearing a total body transformation, aggressive air dams, flared arches, side skirts and spoilers, all bolted on for $14,000 on top of the donor car's price. The finished product looked exactly as if someone had vacuum-sealed a perfectly ordinary Commodore inside rigid plastic cling wrap, then left it baking in the Aussie sun for 4 hours. Every single surface that didn't already have bodywork received extra bodywork. In the most exquisitely timed footnote in Australian motoring history, Peter Brock himself reportedly walked away from his consultancy role on the project, deeply dissatisfied with its aesthetic direction. Even the bloke whose name once hung above the door wanted absolutely nothing to do with this plastic-clad adventure. Somewhere below on this list, a sleepy Sunshine Coast holiday town produced a supercar that violently embarrassed a Ferrari. This is that kind of list. In 1986, Queensland entrepreneur Paul Halstead and ex-McLaren Formula One engineer Barry Locke made a decision bordering on utter madness. They stripped Alfa Romeo Sprint shells, binned the Italian engines, bolted in a Holden 5.0-litre Group A racing V8, and named it after the Italian word for toy. Built in a sleepy Calundra factory, the result was a mutant masterpiece, pumping out 300 horsepower and a Kevlar-clad body weighing just over a ton. It was genuinely quicker to 100 than a contemporary Ferrari 348. Parked on a local street, it looked like a rallying spaceship that had taken a very wrong turn into a suburban Woolies car park. Only 15 of these Group B monsters were ever built. Aussies couldn't spell the name, but the lucky few who drove this supercar never forgot a single terrifying second. In 1969, while the world was busy watching the moon landing, Holden unveiled a concept car so uncompromisingly futuristic it made everything else on the road look like a horse-drawn disappointment. The Hurricane was a mid-engined V8 weapon sitting just 1,016 millimeters tall, literally lower than your average garden letterbox. Conventional doors were for peasants, so to get in, the entire fiberglass canopy hydraulically lifted forward over the cockpit. Inside it packed electric seats, a periscope rear vision system, air conditioning, and a magnetic tape navigation computer. It looked as though Holden's designers had received a detailed briefing from the year 2050 and taken meticulous notes. Tragically, it never reached production. This remains one of the most quietly devastating decisions in Australian automotive history, leaving us to mourn the most stunning, unapologetically weird concept car the world never talked about enough. And that's before we get to a Holden Premier that somehow became Japan's answer to the Toyota Century, with a tiny rotary engine and 9 miles per gallon during an oil crisis. Sydney entrepreneur Bill Buckle built something deeply strange in 1959. He designed a tiny doorless fiberglass roadster, cast it into upper and lower halves, bolted them together at the waistline, and dropped the whole bathtub onto the imported rolling chassis of a German Goggomobil microcar. Power came from a twin-cylinder two-stroke engine, roughly equivalent to 2 Victor lawnmowers bolted together in an uneasy alliance. The entire vehicle weighed a comical 345 kilograms. This meant if you missed your destination or got stuck in a dead-end street, you and your passenger could simply hop out, physically pick the car up, and rotate it by hand. roughly 697 of these gloriously weird little fiberglass slippers were built. Today, surviving darts are lovingly treasured icons, proving that sometimes the strangest ideas make the best history. If you are enjoying watching the video so far, give it a like if you want. In 1975, Mazda desperately needed a flagship limousine to fight the Toyota Century. Their solution was brilliantly unhinged. Ship Australian Holden HJ Premier bodies to Hiroshima, rip out the burly Aussie engines, drop in a tiny 1.3-litre rotary and bolt on a 3-speed automatic. They added velour seats, a dictation machine, and proudly presented this magnificently confused arrangement to Japanese government officials. The fatal flaw? The zippy rotary was catastrophically mismatched to a 1,575-kilogram Australian barge designed for straight-six grunt. The result was a truly abysmal 9 miles per gallon and acceleration so apologetic that journalists struggled to find polite words. Its top speed of 165 kilometers per hour was achievable only downhill with a raging tailwind and a silent prayer. Unsurprisingly, just 800 were built. Most were later quietly crushed, which, given the sheer mechanical torture involved, was honestly a mercy killing. Up next, a sports car whose futuristic canopy system developed a quiet reputation for securely trapping its occupants inside and slow roasting them on summer afternoons. Victorian car dealer Alan Purvis secured the Aussie rights to a British kit car called the Nova, slapped a fiercely local name on it, and began building it in Dandenong. The 1974 Purvis Eureka was a VW Beetle-based, low-slung fiberglass wedge that totally dispensed with boring old doors. Instead, the entire roof canopy lifted forward over the cockpit, demanding peak theatricality just to buy milk. Journalists instantly noted its suspicious resemblance to Holden's Hurricane concept, but the Eureka had its own unique party trick. The optional powered canopy developed a cheerful reputation for malfunctioning at catastrophic moments, securely trapping occupants inside a fiberglass greenhouse on 40-degree Melbourne afternoons. It essentially operated as a mobile slow cooker. Despite occasionally roasting its owners alive, 683 Eurekas were built over 17 committed years, standing as a gloriously weird act of automotive rebellion. Designed and hand-built in a Melbourne shed by brothers Campbell and Graham Bolwell, this one is widely considered one of the most accomplished sports cars Australia ever birthed. It wore a slithering, one-piece fiberglass body draped over a backbone chassis and packed a thunderous Ford V8. Weighing just 920 kilos, it inspired genuine feelings of lust and desire in motoring magazines. Only 118 were ever built. So why is it here? Just picture this low-slung exotic parked in a standard Parramatta driveway in 1972, right next to the neighbor's beige Kingswood. It looked like it had dropped out of a wormhole from another galaxy. With its prominent bonnet bulge and seductive, flowing curves, it was completely alien to Australian streets. It was stunning, ferociously fast, and utterly, magnificently out of place in suburban Aus. A true weirdo, but a beautiful one. A washing machine manufacturer's brave attempt at the family sedan is coming. After that, the disasters get very, very expensive. Harold Lightburn was a wildly successful South Australian who built trusted washing machines and cement mixers. Then, in 1963, Harold suffered a rush of blood to the head and decided to build a family car. History records this pivot with profound pity. This car was a 16-horsepower fiberglass esky with bizarre roof fins, answering aerodynamic questions absolutely nobody was asking. It rolled on wheels, seemingly stolen from a highly ambitious wheelbarrow. The kicker? It didn't have a reverse gear. To go backwards, you had to kill the engine and restart it in reverse. A high-stakes procedure demanding the meditative calm of a Shaolin monk. Boot space was equally mad. you loaded groceries by shoving them through the passenger door. Fewer than 400 poor souls bought one before Harold gratefully retreated to washing machines, where his genius actually belonged. In 1968, Ford's Fairlane was dominating the luxury market with proper long wheelbase elegance and genuine rear legroom. Holden's board panicked and demanded a fast response. Their engineer's solution for the Brougham was characteristically lazy. Instead of stretching the wheelbase, they simply welded an extra 8 inches onto the boot. The resulting rear overhang was so heroically, comically unnecessary that the car looked like it was permanently mid-skid, aggressively trying to reverse away from its own rear wheels. The tragedy was that every single extra inch went strictly to luggage space. Reviewers whipped out tape measures and confirmed the rear legroom was identical to a base model Kingswood. Buyers paid premium limousine money for a completely standard car, wearing a massive, deeply committed steel bustle. It was Holden's Cadillac, possessing all the elegance of a car that had severely lost an argument with its own backside. 3 cars left, including a $700 million design that Holden secretly made a training video to mock, and the wedge-shaped king everyone's been waiting for. The Chrysler Centura was a spectacular recipe for disaster. Chrysler took a lightweight French body designed for a 4-cylinder Simca and violently shoved Australia's massive, beloved Hemi 6-cylinder engine inside. To make it fit, engineers just stretched the nose, creating a front overhang so comically heavy that journalists compared it to a bull pulling a cart. Under hard braking, the nose dived toward the asphalt so aggressively that Chrysler had to fit special hydraulic pressure valves just to stop the car from actively murdering its occupants. If that wasn't enough, massive dock strikes left these bare French bodies rotting on salt-soaked Aussie wharves for months. Brand new ones hit dealerships already sporting surface rust. Driving one of the 19,000 sold was a front-heavy, nose-diving, pre-oxidized act of absolute blind faith with a catastrophic identity crisis baked in at the factory. $700 million. That's the galactic development budget Ford torched on the AU Falcon, a car whose Series 1 front end featured a cascading waterfall grille so immediately offensive, the Aussie press dubbed it the paper shredder within days. The rear end drooped with the exhausted resignation of a vehicle that had already given up on life. The melted proportions looked less designed than discovered. What makes this historically devastating is Holden's ruthless response. They produced a national internal training video specifically to teach their dealers how to weaponize the AU's tragic face against wavering customers. Imagine blowing $700 million only for your rival to make a blooper reel mocking your car's face. Underneath that spectacularly troubled exterior, the engineering and suspension were actually class-leading. But frankly, nobody cared. Australia took one look, physically recoiled, and irrevocably made up its mind. And here is the number one, a wedge so weird the boot was advertised alongside 44-gallon oil drums and whose factory workers threw a party when it finally died. British Leyland, a company famous globally for delivering premium disappointment, unleashed the P76 on Australia in 1973. It was a car so aggressively, philosophically wedge-shaped that marketers proudly bragged the boot could easily swallow an entire 44-gallon oil drum. Not as a joke, as a primary selling point. Some unhinged executive genuinely believed suburban Aussie dads needed daily industrial drum transport. The build quality was exactly what Leyland's battered reputation promised. Endless mechanical dramas delivered with the terrifying enthusiasm of a daily newspaper. After just 2 miserable years and roughly 18,000 sales, the plug was mercilessly pulled. The punchline? The Sydney factory workers who welded its wonky wedge shape reportedly threw a massive rager to celebrate its death. Despised by its buyers, cheered into the grave by its own builders, and ferociously worshipped by weirdo collectors today. If you made it this far, click subscribe. Also, you might be interested in this one. Thank you for watching and goodbye.